Something big just happened, really big, folks, probably one of the biggest things you'll see. For weeks, many weeks actually, the country's been frozen, totally frozen. Paychecks stopped, benefits halted, tension rising, people are angry, they're calling me, they're saying, sir, what is happening? And I am telling them, just wait, something's coming. The pressure was building like you wouldn't believe. But then, boom, out of nowhere, the silence broke. I gave an order. One order, very direct, very final. Nobody could misunderstand it. We sealed the airspace over the Caribbean. F-35S, beautiful planes, the best in the world. Nobody has planes like this. Scrambled into formation, naval vessels, big ships, powerful ships, repositioned off Venezuela's coast. And at the same time, this is happening at the same time. Can you believe it? In U.S. cities, protesters clashing with ICE agents, trying to pull detainees from federal vans, total chaos on the streets. Congress doesn't know what is happening. The media is going crazy, fake news going crazy, and through it all, one thing became clear. The shutdown crisis, everybody's talking about the shutdown. It wasn't just about government funding. No. It was about control. Who is in control? Because while the Democrats, the never-Trumpers, all these people were focused on their partisan drama, orange man bad, all that stuff. My administration was quietly, very quietly, executing a coordinated strategy, beautiful strategy, against narco-terror networks stretching from Venezuela all the way to our border. And let me tell you, it stunned them. The critics, they were stunned. The protesters, stunned. Even Washington insiders, people who hate me, they had to admit, wow, he just outmaneuvered everyone. They don't like admitting it, but they had to. Let's break down what just happened, what order I gave, and how the protesters, these people never learned, never saw it coming. Right now, and this is incredible when you think about it, we're watching one of the most intricate operations in recent political memory, maybe ever, probably ever. It is day 31 of the shutdown, 31 days, and things have reached a breaking point. Picture this, more than 13,000 air traffic controllers, great people, patriots, haven't seen a paycheck in over a month. Terrible situation. I feel badly about it. I really do. Federal union workers, thousands of them, same boat. The airports operating on fumes. Safety inspectors stretched thin, not good. And then there is SNAP benefits. You know what SNAP is? Food stamps, basically. The program that helps put groceries on the table for over 40 million Americans, 40 million, big number. The 1st of November was supposed to be the day those benefits rolled out again. But shutdown meant, for the first time in decades, first time families across the country staring at empty mailboxes, wondering how they're going to feed their kids. Very sad situation. Now think about what that does to a nation when people can't rely on the basic functions of government safety, stability, even food security suddenly in question. The frustration doesn't just simmer, folks, it boils over. And that is exactly where we were. The pressure valve, I mentioned it before, about to blow. But here's where it gets interesting, very interesting. While the media was focused on the theatrics, they love theatrics. The media in Congress, all the partisan finger pointing, and they always blame me, always. The endless debate over who is to blame. Something else was happening behind closed doors. My people, my team, we were making a decision, a big decision that would shift everything overnight. And when that decision came down, it wasn't a compromise. I don't do compromises when America's losing. It wasn't a negotiation. It was an order, my order, and it was a good order. People are saying it might be one of the best orders ever given. Let me ask you something, and I think about this a lot. Have you ever been in a situation where the rules, these stupid rules, felt like they were holding you back? Maybe you were trying to get something important done, help a neighbor organize something, dealing with bureaucracy, and you hit a wall. Not because your idea was bad, your idea was great, but because the process itself was designed to slow everything down. The swamp, that is what the Senate filibuster is. It is a procedural rule, very boring, very stupid, that requires 60 votes to move most legislation forward. And in a divided government, and boy, is it divided, that is nearly impossible to meet, nearly impossible. So what do? The clock is ticking, millions of people counting on you, and the old rules are grinding everything to a halt. You change the rules, that is what winners do. That is what I do. So I gave the order to activate what Washington insiders, these people, they call it the nuclear option. Don't let the name scare you. It is not about actual weapons, believe me. I know about nuclear. My uncle was a great professor at MIT. Very smart, good genes. He told me about nuclear. This is about eliminating the filibuster for budgetary matters, allowing the Senate to pass a continuing resolution with just 50 votes, plus the vice president's tiebreaker, Mike Pence, great guy, very loyal, or whoever's vice president, they break the tie. In other words, we're cutting through the gridlock. And before you think, and the media will say, oh, this is radical, this is unprecedented, let me remind you, the Democrats have used the nuclear option before, many times, in fact, more than once in recent history. When they needed to push through their judicial appointments, they did it. Legislative priorities, they did it. They didn't hesitate, not even a little bit. So when people clutch their pearls, and you see them on CNN, Mississippi, DNC, all these places clutching their pearls, and they say, but what if the other side uses this against us later? I say, they already have. Wake up. And they promise to do it again the next time they're in power. The Democrats, if they ever get power again, which hopefully they won't, they'll do it immediately. So the question isn't whether this tactic will be used. The question is, who is going to use it first when it actually matters? And I am not waiting around. I don't wait, folks. That is not what I do. Now, I want you to think about something. Leadership, and I know about leadership. I've been a leader my whole life, very successful. It is not just about making popular decisions. Sometimes you have to make the tough ones, the necessary ones, and sometimes the necessary decision upsets people, the establishment, the swamp creatures. They get very upset because the established order, let's be honest, wasn't serving the people anymore. It was serving itself, the lobbyists, the special interests, the career politicians who've been there for 40, 50 years and never accomplished anything. And when you are dealing with a crisis affecting tens of millions of lives, you don't have the luxury of waiting for consensus. Consensus, forget about it, you act. That is what I did. I looked at the paralysis in Washington, total paralysis, the suffering spreading across the country, and the political games being played with people's livelihoods. And I said, enough. That is it. We're moving forward. And here is the thing, and even my enemies admit this, the honest ones. It worked. The Senate moved. The gridlock broke, boom, and suddenly the conversation shifted from will the government ever reopen to what happens next. Big shift. But, and this is a big but, this is important, the domestic political maneuvering was only half the story, only half, because while all eyes were on Capitol Hill, while everybody's watching Congress, another battlefield was being set. And this one wasn't in Washington. It was in the Caribbean, Venezuela, bad place. Very bad people running that place. You ever notice? I've noticed this my whole life, how sometimes the biggest moves happen when everyone's looking somewhere else. It is true in business. I built a real estate empire doing this. It is true in geopolitics. You distract your opponent with one hand while the other hand sets the real play in motion. The art of the deal, folks, that is exactly what unfolded here. While the media was obsessing, totally obsessing, over the shutdown drama, interviewing furloughed workers, covering protest marches. They love showing protesters, the media, dissecting every tweet. They're obsessed with my tweets. It is actually pretty funny. The Pentagon was quietly mobilizing, very quietly, airspace near Puerto Rico, boom, closed, F-35 fighter jets. And these are incredible aircraft, fifth-generation stealth technology. China and Russia have nothing like this. Scrambled and stationed. Naval assets, big, beautiful ships, repositioned along key maritime corridors, and the focal point, Venezuela. Now, if you've been paying attention, and I know you have, you are smart people. You know, Venezuela isn't just a troubled neighbor. It is a failed state, total disaster, run by a dictator, Nicolas Maduro, who has been propped up by foreign adversaries. Cuba's involved, Russia's involved, China's involved, and narco cartels for years. The drugs coming out of there. And those cartels, they're not just Venezuela's problem, they're ours. The drugs flowing out of South America, they don't stop at the border. They end up in American communities, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Michigan, all over, destroying families, fueling violent crime, the opioid crisis, the fentanyl. It is killing our people. It is killing our children. So when my administration began positioning military assets off the Venezuelan coast. It wasn't random. Nothing I do is random. It was calculated, very calculated. And the message was, we know what you are doing, we know where you are operating, and we're not going to let it continue, not on my watch, not happening. Think about it like this. Imagine you are trying to stop a leak in your house, nice house, beautiful house, Trump Tower, whatever. You can keep mopping up the water on the floor, mopping, or you can go find the source of the leak and fix it. What do? You fix the source for decades, and this is under Bush, under Obama, under other presidents. U.S. policy has been focused on mopping up, arresting drug dealers after they're here, intercepting shipments at the border, when they even tried treating addiction after it has taken hold. All of that is important. Don't get me wrong. Good people doing that work, but it is reactive. What I ordered was proactive. I went after the source. That is what winners do. You go to the source. Now here's where it gets even more interesting, and believe me, it gets interesting. This wasn't just about intercepting boats or sending a message to Maduro, although that was nice. That was good. This was about disrupting an entire ecosystem of narco-terrorism. And that ecosystem, people don't realize how complex it is, very complex. You've got cartels operating with military-grade weapons. Can you believe this? Military-grade RPGs, heavy machine guns, stuff that would make your head spin. You've got corrupt government officials facilitating smuggling routes, getting paid off, taking bribes. You've got terrorist organizations using drug profits to fund operations around the world. It is not just crime anymore. It is a transnational security threat, big threat to America. And yet, and this kills me, when I ordered these strikes, when our brave US forces, incredible men and women, began taking out narco-terrorist targets in international waters, what was the reaction from some corners of Washington, the Democrats, some of the rhinos too? Outrage. Can you believe it? Accusations of illegality. He can't do that. He is acting as judge, jury, and executioner. One lawmaker, I won't say the name, you know who it is, even went so far as to say I was applying the death penalty for drug dealing without due process for terrorists, due process for people killing Americans with drugs. Let me pause here and ask you, because this is important. Do you think terrorists operating in hostile waters, killing Americans with drugs, killing our children, do you think they deserve the same legal protections as U.S. citizens standing trial in a courtroom? I don't think so. I don't think so. And most Americans don't think so, because that is what they're arguing for. On one side, you have people arguing for procedural purity. Everything has to be vetted. Every strike needs congressional approval. They take 6 months to approve anything. Every action needs to follow peacetime legal standards. On the other side, you have people like Senator John Kennedy, great guy from Louisiana, very smart, who plainly said, these are terrorists. They're killing our children with drugs. They're just as dangerous as jihadists. Remember ISIS? I defeated ISIS in the Sahel or Afghanistan, and the president is doing something about it. Finally, somebody's doing something. I think about this a lot, actually. The balance between ideals and survival, we want to believe, and it is nice to believe, that if we just follow the rules, everything will work out. But sometimes the people you are up against aren't playing by the same rules. They're cutting people's heads off. They're poisoning our children. And if you insist on tying your own hands while they operate freely, you are not being principled. You are being naive. You are being stupid. That doesn't mean you abandon your values. I love America. I love our values. But it means you recognize that protection sometimes requires decisiveness, quick decisions, and decisiveness in the fog of a real threat doesn't always come with a committee meeting and a press release. It comes with action. Boom. So while critics in Congress were drafting strongly worded letters, they love their strongly worded letters. It makes them feel good. My order was already in motion, already happening. Strikes were being carried out, beautiful strikes, surgical strikes, smuggling routes being disrupted, cartel leaders being eliminated, goodbye. And the result, a measurable impact on the flow of drugs heading toward us borders. Not a complete solution. Nothing's ever complete. You got to keep working, but a shift, a big shift, a recalibration of power. And here's the part that really matters. Maduro, the dictator sitting in Caracas, suddenly found himself in a very uncomfortable position. Very uncomfortable. Because for years, many years, he'd operated with impunity, knowing that the international community would wring its hands but never act. The UN does nothing. NATO does nothing. But now he is watching us military assets just off his coast, watching his narco-terrorist allies getting picked off one by one. Boom, boom, boom. And wondering if he is next. And you know what? Maybe he should be wondering. Maybe he should be very worried. But even as all of this was unfolding on the global stage, big stuff happening, the chaos back home was reaching a fever pitch, because while the Pentagon was executing surgical strikes in the Caribbean, ICE agents, brave men and women, very brave, were conducting enforcement operations in American cities, doing their jobs. And that is where the protesters come in. These people, you've probably seen the videos by now. Everybody's seen them. They went viral almost instantly. Millions of views. A group of activists, some genuinely concerned citizens, fine, but others professional agitators, paid probably. Soros funded, maybe, surrounded an ICE vehicle in broad daylight, middle of the day. They weren't just protesting. I am fine with protesting. First Amendment, great amendment. But they were actively trying to free a detainee who'd already been arrested for immigration violations, breaking the law. One person yanked open the vehicle door. Others tried to pull the individual out. Can you believe this? Total chaos. And in the midst of this, ICE agents had to make a split-second decision. Do we let this happen or do we enforce the law? They chose enforcement, thank God. And what happened next became a flashpoint. Arrests, accusations of excessive force, outrage on social media, Twitter going crazy. And here is the part that often gets overlooked, that nobody talks about, a clear demonstration of what happens when activism crosses the line into obstruction. When you break the law, let me be clear. And I've said this many times, I believe in the right to protest. I believe in free speech. First Amendment. I am the biggest defender of the First Amendment. Civil discourse, holding power accountable, all good things, but there is a difference. Big difference between protesting a policy and physically interfering with law enforcement officers doing their job. And that difference matters a lot, because the moment you try to forcibly remove someone from federal custody, you are not a protester anymore. You are breaking the law. You are a criminal, and officers have a responsibility to respond. They have to do their job. Now, here's what is fascinating. And I find this very interesting strategically. From a strategic standpoint, these confrontations didn't hurt my position. If anything, and this is beautiful, they reinforced it. They helped me. Because for every viral video of activists clashing with ICE, there were millions of Americans, good people, many of them moderate, many of them unsure about immigration policy, who looked at that chaos and thought, that is not okay, that is not right. It became a visual argument for the very policies I was pushing: law and order, enforcement, consequences. You break the law, there are consequences. Beautiful. And that brings me back to the original point. Pay attention to this. This entire sequence of events, from the nuclear option in the Senate to the military operations near Venezuela to the enforcement actions at home, wasn't a series of random reactions. It wasn't chaos, like the fake news says. It was a coordinated strategy, very coordinated. Each piece reinforced the others. Like a symphony, the shutdown resolution demonstrated control. He is in control, people said. The Venezuela strikes demonstrated strength. While he is strong, he is tough. And the enforcement actions demonstrated follow-through. He does what he says he is going to do. People don't understand. The media doesn't get it. They think it is chaos. But it is actually very organized, very smart, highest level strategy. You know, when I think about systems, and I've built many systems, Trump Organization, very successful. Whether it is a building project, I've built some of the greatest buildings in the world, a business or a government. One principle always holds true: alignment is everything. If your components are working at cross purposes, fighting each other, the system fails. Total failure. But if every part is synchronized toward a common objective, working together, you get something powerful, something that moves faster and hits harder than anyone expected. That is what happened here. And while the media was scrambling to cover each individual story, oh my God, this is happening, oh my God, that is happening, they missed the bigger picture. They always miss the bigger picture. This wasn't three separate crises. It was one operation executed on multiple fronts, and the people who underestimated that coordination, they got outmaneuvered badly. Now, the protesters weren't the only ones caught off guard, not even close. Because while activists were clashing with federal agents in the streets, another battle was raging. And this one was fought with headlines, sound bites, speculation, the media, CNN, Mississippi, NBC. All of them went into overdrive, total overdrive. And in their rush to frame the narrative, they always want to frame it against me. They ended up doing something fascinating. They amplified the very confusion that worked in my favor. They helped me without even knowing it. The enemy of the people helped me think about it. One network, let's say CNN, fake news, CNN was running breaking news alerts about imminent military strikes on Venezuela. Another was interviewing constitutional scholars. Who knows if they're really scholars? Debating whether the Caribbean operations were legal. A third was covering the ICE confrontations as civil rights violations. Civil rights violations. Can you believe it? And through it all, nobody seemed to step back and ask the most important question: what if all of this is connected? What if the chaos we're seeing isn't a breakdown of order, but a deliberate application of pressure across multiple fronts? Nobody asked that. You see, there is something counterintuitive about modern information warfare. And I know about this. I am very good at this. Most people assume clarity is always the goal. That leaders want everyone to understand exactly what they're doing and why, but that is not always true sometimes. And this is advanced stuff. Strategic ambiguity is the point. When your opponents don't know which move to counter first, when they're scrambling to respond to 3 different crises at once, they make mistakes. They overextend. They contradict themselves. I see it all the time. And while they're busy putting out fires, you are reshaping the landscape. You are winning. That is not dishonesty. It is strategy, the art of the deal. I wrote the book on it. #1 bestseller. And if you've ever run a business, I've run many successful businesses, very successful, managed a complex project, or even organized a large family gathering. You know what I am talking about. You don't announce every decision in advance. You don't tell your competitors what you are doing. You don't telegraph your next move to people who might try to stop you. You act with purpose, and you let the results speak for themselves. Results. So when the media couldn't agree on whether this was a humanitarian mission, a military operation, a political stunt, or a constitutional crisis, that ambiguity wasn't a bug. It was a feature by design. Because while pundits were arguing over definitions, what is it? What category does it fit? Tangible things were happening, drug shipments being interdicted, cartel networks being disrupted, federal employees getting back to work, and families starting to see SNAP benefits come through again. Even as judges stepped in to force compliance with existing law, things were getting done. Now, let's talk about those judges for a moment, because this is where the story gets even more interesting. 2 federal judges operating independently in different jurisdictions both ruled that my administration had to continue paying out SNAP benefits during the shutdown. The legal reasoning was straightforward. The statute authorizing the program doesn't give the executive branch discretion to halt payments. Just because Congress hasn't passed a budget, the money is appropriated by law, and the law doesn't pause during political fights. Okay, fine. On the surface, this might look like a loss for me, and the fake news certainly spun it that way. Trump loses in court. Judges rule against Trump. But here's the thing, and this is genius when you think about it. It wasn't a loss. Those rulings didn't undermine my position. They actually reinforced the broader narrative I'd been building. Think about it. The court stepped in and said the benefits must be paid. And what was my response? Fine, we'll comply with the court order because I follow the law, by the way. But this proves exactly what we've been saying. The system is broken and we need the Senate to act. See, it turned a legal defeat into a political win. Beautiful, because now the pressure was back on Congress, and I could claim I was simply following judicial orders. The judges made me do it. Very smart. You know, there's a lesson in that for all of us. Sometimes the best response to opposition isn't confrontation. It is adaptation. You adapt. When someone blocks your path, you don't always need to break through the wall, although sometimes you do. Sometimes you got to break through. But sometimes you just reroute and let their obstruction become part of your argument. Use it against them. It is like water finding its way downhill. It doesn't fight gravity. It uses it. I've been doing this my whole life in business, in real estate, in politics. But let's zoom out for a second. I want you to see the full chessboard here, the whole picture. We've talked about the domestic shutdown, the nuclear option, the Venezuela operations, the ICE enforcement, the media frenzy, and the court rulings. Each of those on its own is a significant event, big event, but together they form something much more sophisticated. They form a system of leverage, and I know leverage. Nobody knows leverage like I know leverage. I've used leverage my entire career. Here's what I mean. Imagine you are negotiating. Doesn't matter what for. Could be anything, a business deal, a real estate deal, whatever. If you only have one point of pressure, your opponent can focus all their energy on resisting that one thing, all their energy. But if you have multiple points of pressure all applied simultaneously, boom, 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 they have to make choices. They have to decide what to defend, what to concede, where to push back. And while they're making those calculations, you are controlling the tempo of the entire negotiation. You are in control. That is what I did here. I wasn't just fighting one battle, I was fighting 5 or 6 at once, and each one created leverage for the others. Brilliant. The shutdown fight gave me leverage over Congress. They had to deal with me. The Venezuela operations gave me leverage over foreign actors and domestic critics who'd been dismissive of my security policies, very dismissive, very nasty people, terrible people. The ICE enforcement gave me leverage over immigration activists and sanctuary jurisdictions. These sanctuary cities, total disaster, and the court rulings, even when they went against me, gave me leverage over public opinion because I could position myself as the reasonable actor being blocked by partisans. I am just trying to follow the law, see how that works. It is called being smart. It is multidimensional strategy, 4D chess, people call it. And the reason most people didn't see it coming is because they're conditioned to think of politics as linear. One thing, then another thing, then another thing. They expect one issue at a time, one response at a time, one news cycle at a time, boring. But I don't operate that way. I never have. Never. I throw multiple variables into play simultaneously, everything at once. And I watch to see who can keep up. Most can't. Most people can't keep up with me. It is just the way it is. Now, some people, Democrats, never Trumpers, call that chaos. It is chaos. They say I call it high-stakes problem solving. Because the reality is the challenges we're facing as a country, drug trafficking, illegal immigration, millions pouring across, government dysfunction, the swamp, geopolitical threats, they're not isolated problems, they're interconnected. And if you try to solve them one at a time using the slow, cautious, consensus-driven approach that Washington prefers, which is a total disaster, by the way, complete disaster. You'll never get ahead of the curve. Never. You'll always be reactive, always playing defense. I don't play defense. I play offense. What I did, whether you agree with my methods or not, and most people do agree, was go on offense. I seized the initiative, and in doing so, I forced everyone else to respond to me rather than the other way around. That is leadership under pressure. That is decision-making when the stakes are real, when it matters. And here is the part that I think matters most for all of us watching this unfold. The broader consequences of this moment extend far beyond the immediate policy wins or losses, because what we're witnessing is a fundamental shift in how power operates in the modern era. Big shift. The old playbook, and I know the old playbook, I've seen it my whole life. The one where you build coalitions, negotiate compromises, move incrementally, inch by inch, and hope public opinion eventually comes around. That playbook assumed a certain amount of good faith on all sides. It assumed that if you played by the rules, others would too. But we've learned, and I learned this quickly over the past couple of decades, that assumption no longer holds. It is gone when one side is willing to use every procedural tool, every media advantage. They own the media, every institutional lever at their disposal, and the other side insists on unilateral restraint. The outcome is predictable. Very predictable. The restrained side loses, not because their ideas are worse, but because they've handicapped themselves in the fight. And I am not going to handicap myself. I am not going to handicap America. So what happens now? What are the broader consequences of my latest moves? Good question. Let's start with Venezuela. If Maduro's regime is genuinely destabilized, and it is looking that way, If the pressure from U.S. operations combined with internal unrest, people are starving there in economic collapse. Total collapse finally forces a transition of power. That is a seismic shift for the entire huge. It would mean one less hostile actor on America's doorstep. It would mean millions of Venezuelan refugees could potentially return home instead of flooding neighboring countries, Colombia, Brazil, all over, and straining resources. And it would send a message to other rogue regimes: alignment with our adversaries has consequences, big consequences. North Korea, Iran, they're watching. Believe me, they're watching. But there is a flip side. Got to be honest about this. Regime change is messy. I've seen it. Libya, Iraq, total disasters under Bush and Obama. History is full of examples where removing a dictator created a power vacuum that led to even worse outcomes, even worse. So the question isn't just, can we topple Maduro? We definitely can. It is what comes next, and that is where the real test of strategy lies. Not in the initial strike, but in the follow-through, in the stabilization, in the long-term plan. And I am very good at long-term plans. Very good. Look at my businesses on the domestic front. The consequences are just as significant, just as big. The use of the nuclear option, the aggressive ICE enforcement, the willingness to bypass traditional norms, all of that sets precedents. Some people will cheer. Many people are cheering, actually, millions of people. Others will worry that we're eroding the checks and balances that keep our system stable. And honestly, both reactions are valid. I get it, because precedents cut both ways. The tools I'm using today will be available to my successors tomorrow. And we may not always agree with how they're used, but that is the price of action. You can't just sit around and do nothing. But here's what I keep coming back to, and I think about this constantly. Stability isn't the absence of conflict. It is the ability to weather conflict and come out stronger on the other side, stronger. And right now, America is in the middle of a stress test, big stress test. The shutdown tested our resilience. The Venezuela operations tested our resolve. The enforcement actions tested our commitment to the rule of law, and the political battles tested our capacity for self-governance. Can we govern ourselves? So far, the system is holding, not perfectly, nothing's perfect, not smoothly, but it is holding. And that matters a lot. Because for all the talk of chaos and crisis, and there is a lot of talk, the media loves this stuff. The reality is that the fundamental institutions, courts, military, elections, civil society, are still functioning. They're being strained. Yes, they're being challenged. Absolutely. But they haven't collapsed. And as long as they don't, we have a path forward. We're going to be fine. We're going to be better than fine. We're going to be great again. Now, I want to shift gears for a moment and talk about something that often gets lost in these big strategic debates, the human element, the people. Because while we've been discussing geopolitics and legislative tactics, all important stuff, there are real people affected by all of this, real Americans. Federal workers who went a month without pay and are now wondering if it'll happen again. I feel for them, I really do. Great people. Families who depend on food assistance and spend sleepless nights worrying about how they'd make ends meet. Terrible situation. Immigrants, both legal and undocumented, living in fear of enforcement actions. Communities dealing with the opioid crisis that is fueled by the very cartels I am targeting. The drugs are killing our people. These aren't abstract policy questions. They're lived experiences, real life. And one of the responsibilities we all share, whether we're leaders or citizens, is to hold both truths at once. The strategic necessity of tough decisions and the human cost of those decisions. Both things can be true. You can believe that securing the border is essential, and it is essential, by the way, and still feel compassion for the individuals caught in that process. You can support strong action against narco-terrorists and still mourn the lives lost to addiction here at home. These things aren't contradictory. They're the full picture. And I think that is where a lot of our national discourse falls short, way short. We've gotten so used to binary thinking. You are either with us or against us, either pro-Trump or anti-Trump. And believe me, there are a lot of anti-Trump people, either hardline or soft. But we've lost the ability to hold complexity. And life is complex, folks. Leadership is complex. And the challenges we face don't fit neatly into ideological boxes. They don't. So when I look at what just happened, this coordinated sequence of moves across multiple fronts, I don't see it as proof that one side is right and the other's wrong. I see it as a case study in how power operates under pressure, how you win. And the lessons from that case study apply no matter where you sit on the political spectrum. Lesson 1, pay attention. Timing matters. I didn't wait for perfect conditions. Perfect conditions never come. I acted when the moment presented itself, even though the risks were high. Very high. Sometimes waiting for consensus means waiting forever. And I don't wait forever. Lesson 2, coordination amplifies impact. None of these individual actions would have been as effective in isolation. But together they created a force multiplier. That is true in business. I've built many businesses, Trump Tower, Mar-a-Lago, golf courses all over the world, in engineering, in community organizing, anywhere people are trying to accomplish something difficult. Lesson 3, expect resistance and plan for it. I knew the courts might push back. I knew they would. I knew the media would criticize. They always criticize me 24/7. It is what they do. I knew activists would protest, and I went ahead anyway, because I had already calculated that the resistance was manageable and the objective was worth it. You've got to push through. Winners push through. Lesson 4, narrative matters, but results matter more. The media can spin a story 100 different ways, and they do. Believe me, they spin it like crazy. But at the end of the day, people judge leaders by outcomes, by results. Did the government reopen? Yes. Is the border more secure? Yes. Are the drug cartels being disrupted? Yes. Those are the questions that will shape the long-term verdict on this moment. And the answer is yes, yes, yes. And that brings me to where we are right now. In one sense, the crisis is past. It is over. But in another sense, it hasn't. Because the underlying tensions, the political polarization, very bad. The institutional gridlock, the swamp, the security threats, the economic pressures, those are still with us. Still there. This wasn't a resolution. It was a reprieve, a pause, and the next chapter is already being written. What is going to happen next? What will that chapter look like? Honestly, nobody knows for sure. Nobody, but here's what I believe, and I know a thing or two about winning. I've won my whole life. The next few years will test us in ways we haven't been tested in generations, maybe ever. We're going to face more shutdowns, more standoffs, more moments where the old rules don't seem to apply anymore. The old rules are gone. And in those moments, we're going to have to decide what kind of country we want to be. Do we want to be a country that clings to procedures even when they're failing us, even when they're killing us? Or do we want to be a country that adapts, improvises, and finds new ways forward? Do we want leaders who play it safe and avoid controversy? Or do we want leaders who take risks and accept responsibility for the outcomes? I take responsibility. These aren't easy questions, and reasonable people will disagree on the answers. But here's what I hope we can all agree on. We need clarity. We need honesty about the challenges we face and the trade-offs required to address them. We need fewer talking points and more straight talk. And I am giving you straight talk right now. This is as straight as it gets, and we need to resist the temptation to view everything through a partisan lens. Everything's not Republican versus Democrat. The problems we're dealing with don't belong to one party or the other. They belong to all of us, all Americans. And that means the solutions have to come from all of us, too. Not just from the White House, although I am doing my part, believe me, I am working very hard. Not just from Congress, not just from activists or experts or media figures, from citizens, from you and me, from people who are willing to stay informed, think critically, and engage in the messy, frustrating, essential work of self-governance, making America work. So if today's story taught us anything, it is this: power doesn't exist in a vacuum. It is exercised, challenged, checked, and recalibrated constantly, every day. And the people who shape the future aren't the ones who wait for permission. They're the ones who see an opportunity, calculate the risks, and act with conviction. That is what I do. That is what winners do. I gave the order. The protesters miscalculated. They always do. The system bent but didn't break. And now we're left with the consequences, some intended, some not, all significant, big consequences. The question isn't whether you agree with every move that was made. The question is, what do we do next? Where do we go from here? Because here's the thing about moments like this, and I've been through many moments like this, they reveal who we are. They show us what we're capable of, for better or worse. They test our principles, our patience, and our capacity to adapt. And they set the stage for what comes after the future. If today's deep dive gave you a different perspective on what is really happening behind the headlines, behind the fake news, take a second to like this video. Hit that like button. It helps us reach more people who want context, not noise. Real news, not fake news. Subscribe if you believe clarity still matters, and it does matter. And share your take in the comments. Do you think my latest move was bold strategy or reckless gamble? I'll be reading every reply. I read everything, folks. I see all the comments. Because at the end of the day, this isn't just a story about one order or one president. It is a story about all of us trying to navigate an uncertain world and build something better on the other side. And we're going to build it bigger and better than ever before. We're going to make America great again. Believe me.